Hey, I'm Lana from Lana Glowshot Art, and in this video, we'll be unboxing the October 2023 sketch box. This box is all about playing with ink in new and interesting ways, and we are gonna just jump right into it. The first product in this box is a set of Sketchbox signature acrylic inks in charcoal, blackberry, and goldenrod. You can apply these inks onto your surface in a variety of ways with the Sketchbox signature dagger brush. It has this unique tapered tip that's perfect for a variety of brush strokes and techniques. We also have the Sketchbox signature liner brush that will apply flowing lines in a variety of different weights. The surface in this month's box is the Stonehenge Aqua Hot Press watercolor paper by Legion. This is a 100% cotton paper with a subtle texture that allows you to render really beautiful details, and this is one of my favorite surfaces to use in my own personal work. You are going to love it. A great way to learn how to use a dagger brush is simply by experimenting with it. Here I'm loading up my dagger brush with the blackberry ink and dragging it across the surface using the long curved edge. I'm also playing around with the weight or the pressure that I'm applying. If I press harder, I get more of those bristles to contact the page. I'm also playing around with using the long edge to draw thinner, more vertical lines. Give yourself 3 to 5 minutes and just explore every single kind of mark that you can make with this brush. As you're exploring, play around with how hard you're pressing, what direction your brush is going, how long and thick your brush strokes are, and how you're holding the paintbrush. There are so many different kinds of marks that you can make with this incredibly versatile brush. Acrylic ink is permanent once dry, which means that it's not going to be reactivated as I sweep this goldenrod ink over the top. This can be a really fun way to mix colors optically. Optical color mixing is when our eyes mix the pigments together as they are transparently laid one on top of the other. But these inks also allow us to physically mix brand new pigments. Here I am swatching the goldenrod right out of the dropper, but I can mix this wet ink on my palette to create new colors. Here I'm mixing the goldenrod and just a little bit of the blackberry ink. And as I move towards the right, I'm adding more and more of the blackberry ink to neutralize this color. And I end up with this really beautiful orangey brown tone that can be perfect for some fall vibes. Next, I'm swatching pure blackberry, and I'm gradually adding more and more of the charcoal color into it, which is creating a variety of more neutral purple hues. Finally, I start with the charcoal, which is swatched right out of the tube, and then I add more and more goldenrod. Because the charcoal is a little bit cooler and has more of a blue undertone, it creates a beautiful green color when it's mixed with the goldenrod. And this can be great to add more variety to your ink paintings. The final combination would be a mixture of the goldenrod, the blackberry, and the charcoal, which is going to give you a much more neutral brown. And of course, you can mix these up in any ratio to create a huge variety of neutral tones. Now let's return to this page and play around with the liner brush. Here I'm using the charcoal ink and I'm going right over the brush strokes that I have already done with the dagger brush. And I'm going to play around with as many different strokes as possible on this page. There's horizontal lines, there's vertical lines, there's swooping curvature lines, there's tighter curves with little dots. There are so many different things that you can do with this brush, and as you play and explore, I encourage you to play around with how you're holding the brush, what angle the bristles are making contact with the paper, how much you are pressing, how much weight you're applying, and how fast you're moving the brush around the page. Play, explore, and see how many different ideas you can come up with. The next product in this box is the Kuretake Bomoji brush pen in Scarlet Crimson. Depending on how you hold this brush pen and the amount of pressure you apply, you can create a variety of different marks, which gives you so many options in this month's box. Play around with the different kinds of marks you can make. And again, remember that you can play around with how you hold the pen, how much pressure you apply, and how long or short or curved your brush strokes are. The white Higgins drawing ink is going to be great for applying white highlights over the top of ink washes. My favorite way to use this ink is by using the dropper and applying a little bit onto my palette, then using a clean liner brush to apply details over ink washes. play around with a bunch of different lines that you can create with your liner brush, and keep in mind that they might be a little different than the lines you created with your acrylic ink because this ink is a little bit thicker. And the last product in the box is the Art Primo Hit and Go Empty Marker. To get this marker ready to use, you need to remove the top and apply some of the acrylic ink into the reservoir. You can put in one of these colors straight into the tube, but a really fun application is to mix the colors inside this reservoir. And I am gonna play around with mixing one of those beautiful green tones by adding some of the charcoal ink and some of the goldenrod ink. Once all the ink is in there, all you need to do is put the top back on and shake it. That little metal piece isn't something that broke off. It's actually there to mix up your pigments and to keep them fresh as you use this marker in the coming weeks and months. The liner paintbrush is ideal for creating variety in your brush stroke, but this hit and go marker is perfect for creating really consistent, even lines. A great way to warm up with these materials is to create a bouquet of flowers. This allows you to play with a variety of brush marks and colors and to really create something beautiful. I am using this month's prompt, which is mischief, to create a spooky thematic bouquet. And I'm starting with the goldenrod and some mixtures of goldenrod with that blackberry color to create a variety of different warm hues. Then I'm using the dagger brush to create so many different kinds of flowers, textures, and foliage. I am not going into this with a plan, and I challenge you not to go into it with a plan either, but to rather just explore and experiment different kinds of marks that look kind of floral in nature. After I finish up with some of those golden colors, I switch over to some pure violet colors by using the blackberry right out of the dropper. I'm using all different sides and angles of my dagger brush to create a ton of different texture and variety. Finally, I mix up some greens with the charcoal and the goldenrod, and I use these variety of different greens to create some leaves and some ferns and some different kinds of plants to round out this bouquet of flowers. Once I have the big color and the composition established with the dagger brush, I'm coming in with the liner brush for more specific details and some refinement. Here I'm outlining one of the flowers, but I'm not going around the entire flower with the exact same width. Instead, I add variety to the width by playing around with pressure. I'm also playing around with different kinds of marks that I can make with the liner brush, and I'm referring back to that sample page where I played around with all of my different brush strokes. As you play around with your liner brush, think of the different kinds of textures, patterns, and details that you can add. And don't worry about getting it just right. Play around, explore, experiment, and if it doesn't go perfectly the first time, just try it again. That's the fun of going into a project like this without a plan. You can really surprise yourself and discover things that you wouldn't have discovered if you did come in with a plan. After I finished up with the liner brush, I grabbed my brush pen and began to add this bright scarlet crimson color throughout the bouquet. This gives the color scheme a very spooky, unique characteristic that I just kind of love. Continue to play around with the different kinds of brush strokes and marks that you can make with both the Kuretake brush pen and your liner brush when you start applying the white Higgins ink. As I've already said, there's no right or wrong when you play around with this bouquet. Just explore, experiment, and have fun. When I swatched the Kuretake brush pen in Scarlet Crimson, I immediately thought tiger, and I had to paint a tiger with the color scheme in this month's box. So I'm gonna show you how I painted this tiger with these supplies from beginning to end. And I started with thin washes of color over the tiger with the goldenrod. This wash of color is the ink plus some water applied quickly over the entire surface. And I'm trying to apply it as evenly as possible without letting any of the edges dry so that I can have again, that really even coverage. After covering that whole area, I mix up a green with the goldenrod and the charcoal and applied that wash to the background. The next step in this layered approach is to begin to lay in some of the orange parts of the tiger. And I start with the goldenrod and mix a little bit of the blackberry into it to create that warm, subtle orange color. And then I loosely block in all of the orange shapes. Working in a layered approach allows you to take the perfectionism out of the process entirely so that you can just work on getting a little bit closer to your end goal with each pass. So far, I'm just using the dagger brush because I'm working in larger swatches of color. But when I transition to finer details, I'm definitely going to switch over to my liner brush and begin working on the texture of the tiger. I want to see what the scarlet crimson looks like next to these oranges that I've mixed up. So I'm going to apply those in next. I'm using the brush pen to begin to illustrate the texture of the fur. So I'm paying really close attention to which directions my marks go in and how long my strokes are so that the texture that I'm rendering really mimics the fur of this tiger. After that scarlet crimson was all over the tiger, I came back in with the goldenrod mixed with the blackberry and used it to transition some of these really bright, intense oranges into the more subtle areas of the tiger. After that was completed, it's finally time to add the black tiger stripes. And we don't have an exact black in this set. The charcoal's pretty close, but mixing the charcoal with a little bit of blackberry makes a really beautiful, interesting color. And that's what I decided to use for the stripes. Don't be too overwhelmed with how fast I'm doing this. This is sped up to anywhere from 10 to 12 times the original speed. Take your time with both the liner brush and the dagger brush to apply the textures and the details in your piece. And don't feel like you have to complete an entire piece in a short 2-minute window, because that's just not realistic. In this painting, I've been going back and forth between different tools and colors, but overall, I am following this rule of working from general to specific. That means that I'm starting with the big, basic general shapes, and then I am refining with each layer, getting more and more specific. I intentionally did not pick these fine, detailed black stripes for the very first layers. I wanted to make sure I knew where everything else was first. Once I've got my dark tiger stripes and I feel really good about the color and the transitions, it's time to come in with my highlights. And I'm gonna use the Higgins drawing ink to apply the highlights right over the surface. Because I started with those initial washes of color, this white is going to have huge impact over the top of these light yellows and oranges. But if I don't want these whites to be super intense, I could use the white and mix it with a little bit of goldenrod for a more subtle effect. I continue to go back and forth between my different tools until this tiger is all the way complete. And then the very last thing that I do is I grab my hit and go marker and I apply some grass right over the top so that this tiger feels like it really is in its environment. And now this piece is complete. I hope you learned a ton about using ink and line work in this video, and I can't wait to see what you create. So be sure to use the hashtag SketchboxOctober when you post your work online. For more unboxing videos and tutorials, you can head over to our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. See you later.